Welcome to Collegiate Organizations 101. My name is Dragon, and I will be the moderator for this panel. Just as a brief introduction to myself, my name is Dragon, as I've already said, and I used to be the ex-president for the Boston University Gaming Club. Today, we'll be covering a lot of topics such as setting visions for your club, how to build your community, and kind of working through the transition process between yourself and whoever your incoming leader is. And now we'll have Adam and Kathy introduce themselves.
I was like, are we going by like the screen or? Hey guys, what's up? My name's Adam. I work for Ambox. I used to be the president over at Rutgers Esports a million years ago, and I helped co-found it. Very, very excited to be on this panel. I just want to tell all of you that Dan is really sorry. He wished he could be here, but he had something really, really important kind of come up. But Kathy and I are really happy to be here, and Dragon is obviously going to do all he can to moderate the crap out of this panel.
Hi everyone, so my name is Kathy Chung. I am currently the assistant director at UCI Esports. I am probably going to be speaking mostly to my student experience. However, I was an undergraduate at UCI as well, and I helped co-found and lead our gaming club there.
Cool. So the first question we have is talking about your club's vision. And so having a club vision is super important and kind of understanding the state of your club and the steps you need to make it successful. Adam, could you talk about your time at Rutgers Esports, what you guys decide your vision should be when you guys founded the organization?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. You know, when we founded Rutgers Esports, I can tell you right now that we had probably no idea what we were doing, but we knew one thing, and that's that we wanted to make Rutgers the center of collegiate esports. And I think that just comes from a place of ambition, but the most important thing I think when it comes to coming up with a vision is, one, you have to make sure obviously that everyone's there aligns with that vision, right? If you have people that don't agree with it, it's probably not going to be the best thing to do if all of you are kind of working towards different things. But more importantly, I think the most important thing is that by having a vision and knowing where you want to go allows you to take those steps to get to where you want to be, right? So if you have no idea where you're going, you're kind of wandering around aimlessly. So because we knew that we wanted to be the center of collegiate esports, everything we did was to try and get to that goal.
Awesome. And Kathy, for you guys, you dived right into kind of creating a space on your campus. So could you talk about what your vision was in getting recognition with your administrators?
Yeah, so I guess even from when we were just a club, obviously now we have a program, now we have a facility. That wasn't the case when we first started in about 2012 to 2014. So we, from the very beginning, however, kind of saw this vision of becoming officially recognized. I was actually invited to speak at the Riot Collegiate Summit in 2015 on actually how to convince your administrators that you are worth following up on. And luckily that happened at UCI shortly after. But literally from year one, we were thinking, why isn't esports as big as traditional sports? We saw a lot of potential for that. And we really wanted to kind of push that envelope while still maintaining, of course, our status as a student org, focus on social events, doing tournaments, doing all sorts of stuff like that. So when we really formed our space, we were thinking about how do we get gamers together? How do we get people out of dorm rooms? How do we build the social environment around gaming as a shared hobby and potential future career? And the facility and everything that came with that, administrative support, that was really down the line. But from year one, I think the fact that we set our sights on that really helped us push that in the following years.
Awesome. Well, I think you bring up a really good point that you have to kind of bring gamers together and incentivize them to get out of their game room, like their dorm rooms. And I think the first step of making your club really successful is laying the solid foundation, which is building out your community. Kathy, could you talk about what your community catered to and how you grew it?
Yeah, so just in terms of, I guess, getting members into our club, right, and thinking about what kind of stuff could we offer for them. Year one, it was very much, I don't even know how many members we had, maybe like 10 to 30 people initially. We were just thinking about like people we met in freshman orientation, getting in one room. We played a lot of League of Legends charades. We did a lot of trivia games, things that were outside of the game, but still relatively easy. Like we just, look at the League Wikipedia and just like pick a bunch of questions and then see if we can come up with giveaways. But back then there was a lot less support in terms of like swag and kind of cool things that we could encourage people to come out. So we did focus a lot on how do we reach people who were already big League of Legends fans, because we started as a league club. And then beyond that, we realized we weren't reaching all the gamers on our campus. We saw a need to expand beyond just supporting one title. And then also there's people that aren't, what's it called, like actively looking for clubs to join. Personally, I like my freshman year, I did not go to the club fair. I like walked through it really quickly. I was like, there's too many people here. I don't like talking to people. I was very, very shy. And even in high school, I was involved in very few clubs and only joined the ones I was forced to go to. So that really resonated with me when I was kind of getting up the ladder of officership, I guess, within the league club, to think about how do I reach the people that naturally aren't gravitating to these places of finding the clubs they can join and finding these social circles. So that included things like, how do we put posters up in like housing communities? How do we reach friends of friends and kind of expand beyond just the mutual circle? And that was how we really grew in our first couple of years. Still as League of Legends Club, it really was word of mouth and expanding beyond just like, we're not just going to put a poster up in the gaming rooms and things like that. We had to work beyond that, not just reach out on the Facebook group for League of Legends, but like the class of groups and things like that.
Awesome. Adam, I know that Rutgers is a really, really big campus. And like sometimes it takes like a bus to get from one end of campus to the other. Even that's like 20 minutes.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure that advertising was a lot more different from for you guys. So could you talk about how you kind of grew your community and brought people to your club functions?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So Dragon is right on the money. Rutgers is a massive campus. So the New Brunswick campus is then separated into 4 different campuses, which you have to take buses to. So it's a very, very large one. And it was certainly a little difficult to make sure that everyone could kind of get together and get the word out. I think what was really good for us is that we had so many different gaming clubs already, so that when Rutgers Esports was created, we were kind of starting off already with the community, which was really, really awesome and something that we were very happy about. But obviously that only goes so far. And, you know, I usually like to say that we kind of looked at the holy trinity at that time of what collegiate esports was, which is, of course, the Utahs, your UCIs, and your UCSDs. Myself, as well as Dan, who would be here, we both really looked up to all 3 of those. And everything that we did was sort of try and model ourselves and to aspire to be like them. So, you know, we made sure that we did our socials correctly. We made sure at some point we were going to make content. Didn't actually work out, but that's something that we planned. There's a lot of different things, but I think in terms of what we did, it was through that social, through that taking advantage of every single kind of marketing that you can, whether it be emails, whether it be even campus newspapers and things like that. Really did our best to make sure we got our names out there. And I think that even after that, right, one of the special things that we did to kind of get more members is that we didn't just do gaming events. It's very, very easy to kind of tunnel vision and be like, hey, we're a gaming club. What kind of events are we going to do? We're going to do gaming kind of thing. Like there's a lot of other things that you can do, I promise. One of the things that was a tradition at Rutgers StarCraft Club is that every single semester we do a trip to both a Korean barbecue place and a sushi place. And it was something that was really, really good for us and helped us bond a lot. And there was a ton of different club movie nights and things like that. So I'd really recommend all of you to please do things that are outside of gaming as well.
Awesome. Honestly, I could go for some Korean barbecue right now. That sounds pretty good. Could you talk about, I guess, how you made all those events accessible to people? So how did you kind of make sure that everyone who wanted to be part of that, obviously, like you already said, don't just make it gaming, but anyone who wanted to come to those events felt welcome there and like they had a lot of fun?
Yeah. It's kind of hard, especially when you get to a large club, right? There could be so many people that you as the president or even with your officers, it's kind of hard to talk to every single person and make sure they feel welcome. I think there's a couple of things that you can do. One, you obviously have to have a really, really good team. Like you can't do it all alone. Something that unfortunately plagues many different collegiate presidents and leaders is that they think that they have to do it all alone. Really make sure that you delegate and make sure that you have a team that you can trust to do certain tasks. It's very, very important. I'd also really recommend that in general, you have to kind of think about the environment that you want for your club, right? If you see someone standing off to the side or doesn't feel as welcome, it's like kind of your responsibility as a leader to make sure that you go out there and make sure that person kind of feels welcome. Even like doing like little smaller things is really important. Like, so when I was growing up, I was part of a youth group and we did a lot of retreats. And at one point I became a youth group leader, and some really, really corny thing that we did that actually turned out to work very well at the club at Rutgers is that we would basically play catch with a soccer ball. And whenever you catch a soccer ball, whatever question, like, so each panel had a question in it. And whenever you catch the ball, whatever panel your right thumb landed on, you had to answer that question. And it sounds kind of silly. It's just, and it wasn't even deep questions. It was like, do you have any siblings? Like, where were you born? Kind of thing. Like, definitely not the most deep questions, but stuff like that, I think really is important to get people to open up. And by the time that we were done with that ball, people wanted like level 2 and level 3 balls. So try and think of little things like that to get people to know each other and get people to feel comfortable.
That's super, super cool. Kathy, did you guys have anything at UCI with like similar traditions like that? Or did you ever face like certain challenges in connecting with people? I know Adam talked a little bit about how sometimes like as a president, you can't reach everyone. So how did you make sure that like you broke down the cliques in your club so that people felt welcome when they came in alone and they saw like 100 gamers already in a room?
Yeah, that's difficult. I feel like same with even games, right? It's the new player experience. How do you get them involved? How do you get them into the community and not just kind of like a spectator? And that's something we thought a lot about. I love that you brought up like icebreakers, essentially, Adam. Like icebreakers get a bad rap. Like people are like, I hate icebreakers. I hate playing 3 lies and 1 truth or whatever it is, because sometimes it can be awkward and sometimes you don't want to share details about yourself yet, or you just have to do it for every single club event you go to, that it becomes tiring. So I think those were great though when you find one that, like Adam's example, where it really resonated with people. And I think for us, we obviously had some icebreakers. We don't have like necessarily traditions for that or anything too special, but I do think that one of the best ways that we were able to connect with people, and there's a lot of pros and cons to this, but it was basically having a family system. And this is what we did by looking at other social clubs. We looked at the culture clubs on campus. We looked at other successful groups in social settings, and oftentimes having a big or having a little or having a family that was connected by some hobby outside of just what the game was able to get people to come together and do fun things. So like back to the food example, we had a family that was, the core of it was they were foodies and they would just get different food every week. Or we had I actually led a family one year in which we really liked Blizzard games. So even though it was a league club back then, we would play like Diablo 3 together and things like that. So I think that's a great way to get people together, is try to find big functional groups of hobbies or even like majors or something to tie people together. But obviously there's some cons to that, like families themselves might become cliques. There's a lot of just forethought you have to think about training your staff and officers to be good family heads and not, play favorites or not, fall into these pitfalls. And I think that was a big aspect of us. We did like families one year, we would cancel it the next year, we would bring it back another year, just kind of based on if people were really passionate about that kind of thing. And that's what we did. Is I would say the number one suggestion I would give is just always be open to feedback, like constantly thinking about, okay, well, families didn't work out this year. Why not? What were the things that went wrong? And how can we improve on it for next year?
Yeah, just to kind of close out this topic, I think Kathy really hit the nail on the head. But more than anything, if there's like this some sort of super overarching theme, I think ultimately what we all have to realize is that gaming clubs, people join them because they all like games. Of course, that's like kind of like the great unifier. But people stay because they make friends, right? They come to clubs and they come to events consistently, not because they want to keep on playing games. They can play games in their dorm, but they stay because they made friends, because there's a chance for them to meet more people and to see the people that they love constantly and on a consistent basis. So the more things that you can do to foster those relationships, the better off your club will be. So it's really, really important to do everything that we just said for this question.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing. I think at the base level for your club specifically, the community is kind of the hardest population to bring together. But at a higher level, both of you guys kind of created your organizations, as you both said, when there were a lot of other gaming clubs around. So like you have your League clubs, you have your Blizzard clubs. So at a higher level, it's also super difficult to bring all these gaming clubs together. How did the two of you guys kind of deal with that situation and bring all the gaming clubs under a unified umbrella?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that because that was essentially our goal, was to unify a lot of these clubs in 2014. So I said we started as a league club, but we didn't stay that way for super long. I do want to shout out the two largest orgs on our campus that were also very successful: Fighting Games, can't forget them, and also the StarCraft and StarCraft 2 clubs.
Hell yeah.
They preceded me. Like, I wasn't even a student, and they were huge. Like, UCI has been, like, SoCal regionals. There's been a lot of cool things going on. And I think it's important to realize that there's a lot of different cultures within these different titles. There's not always a one-size-fits-all approach. So what we ended up doing is, instead of forcing everyone into one homogenized esports game agnostic club, what we decided to do was to create an umbrella organization so we could say, hey, we all represent all the gamers on our campus, or as many that wanted to be involved. We obviously weren't going to force people to join us, but we are not going to run every single game. You're still going to have your own club. You're still going to have your own officer board, your own experts, your own tournament administrators. And all we did was try to bring people together in like one big Discord server, one big Facebook group in which we can share things. Like, we would post announcements from every club so that people might learn about a club they weren't a part of. It was also super great for sponsors. Like, we could give these huge numbers to people that otherwise one single club could not have done. And I think a big part of this is realizing that the school spirit kind of ties it together. We all wanted to do something as UCI, as like a same, just like one united community. And I think people kind of wanted that. So it was obviously challenging to know how to merge that together in a way that made sense. But I think that was worth pursuing, and something that overall it got us on the map. And also why we got recognized by administration is because we had those numbers and those accomplishments across multiple clubs to bring it to the attention of all these faculty and staff members.
Yeah, it's actually funny that we had a very, very similar model. Rutgers Esports is really just an umbrella organization. The analogy I usually like to use is that, like, it's like if we're the U.S. government or the national government, and then all the clubs are just the states, they could do whatever they want. They just have to make sure we're all unified at the end of the day, which is a really good thing for us. One thing that, Kathy pointed out a lot of good things. Another good thing about having that model is that you can dominate the club fair. Instead of just having one club table, you have one for every single game. So suddenly it's an entire side. It really helps with recruitment, trust me. But I think there's a lot of different challenges that kind of come with trying to unify a community. We were lucky that we had communities there, but that doesn't mean that they really integrate that well. But one thing that we were really fortunate in, and that isn't exactly common among collegiate esports clubs from my experience, is that we met every single week. So every Friday, people could come to a club, but we were all in the same place. So it all happened on the second place of a building called the Cirque. And basically in every single room, you had a different game. So you'd have the StarCraft club over here, the Overwatch club over here, the Smash club over here, the League club over here. And it did a really good job of kind of making sure that people felt like a unified community. And gradually people kind of just wandered from room to room, just having fun and talking to people and realizing that they're all part of one big whole. And that's something that we were really, really lucky to have. And something that I was very, very proud of at the end of the day. We did a lot of other stuff too to try and make those bonds a little bit closer, but I think that was the biggest thing, is that because we always met every single week, because we were always in the same location, you kind of just get used to it. And I think that was something that was very important for us.
Well, bringing that many people together under not necessarily like one homogenous group, as Kathy said, is really difficult, because now you have a bunch of leaders that are kind of like vying for the position of power, I guess, or it's difficult to bring them all together to like work as a team. Adam, could you talk a little bit about kind of how to be, well, I'll break this down. First, how you learned to be the leader of all these people, how you brought them all together, and then like the difficulties you faced kind of building out that team, and like what was important in keeping it together.
All right, so I know you said you break it down, but that was like 4 different questions. So like, let's go with like the first and the second, and then I'll answer those. Yeah. So what was the first and second one? Could you repeat that? Sorry. Yeah. So
the first question is how did like you grow as a leader? Like, how did you become a leader and step up into a position of power? Like, so many people are looking up to you.
Oh God, hell if I know. I think when it comes to the StarCraft club, which is really at the beginning of where we get into Rutgers esports, I think I was just really passionate about the game. I just loved StarCraft so much, and I loved the esports so much. And I think that kind of led me. I mean, that's part of the reason why Rutgers esports is really founded. And I never really wanted to be the leader. Like, I've always said that, like, if I can get the Oscar for the best supporting actor, give me that. Like, someone else take the lead. I'm good. But I think more than anything, I wanted to see us do things, like I said, based on that holy trinity of UCI, UCSD, and Utah. And I figured that if no one else was going to step up, I'll step up, because at the end of the day, someone has to get the work done. And I was just really fortunate. A lot of people like to point to me and say, like, oh my God, Adam, like, you did this or whatever. It's completely not true. I think if you look at all the officers that we had and the amount of work that they put in, the amount of talent they had, none of it would have happened without them, especially people like Jackie, Scott, who I know is in the chat, Diego, a whole bunch of people, Jake. Without them, none of it really would have happened. And to your second question, I think was about, how do you find those people? I was lucky for some of them. Like, you don't get a graphic designer like Jackie Chen every single day who does that stuff for free. She works at Discord now. So that was luck. But a lot of it is also you have to have the right kind of recruitment. And even more than that, I think something that we as leaders don't often realize is that because we're leaders, we are often a reflection of the club, right? So whenever you have your meetings and everything like that, the attitude that your club leaders have is the kind of attitude that especially newcomers will think is the kind of culture of that club. So you need to make sure that you have leaders who are good representatives of your club and what you want your community to be. It's very, very critical. Don't settle for less and just be like, oh, he or she is kind of good enough. Like you need to make sure that you have good representatives. Otherwise, the entire culture and the entire, to use, I guess, a business term, user journey is completely screwed around with.
Cool. Kathy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think one of your four-pronged question was talking about how we developed personally into a leader as well. So I guess just to address that briefly is, as I mentioned before, I was super shy. I didn't necessarily have the skills to join a club and then climb the ranks and just be super driven and know all the skills and stuff. I do want to point out, especially to people in the audience right now that are still students and figuring this out, it's really up to you to learn how to do it. And because you're in a college environment, this is the perfect time to do trial and error, perfect time to fail sometimes, and then learn from those failures and those mistakes and grow as a person. And that was just from day one, that was my strategy. My strategy was to eventually convince myself to get over my fear of failing, of making mistakes, and just throwing myself at all these challenges that came up. The way I actually got involved when it was still Elite Club was that I noticed that we didn't really have a graphic designer. We were starting to try thinking about functional roles that we needed. There was no sort of standard charter that every esports club used. We were just trying to make it up on the spot. So I kind of just stepped up, said, hey, I kind of know how to make graphics. I do it for fun. Let's try doing this. And I just started submitting things. And then I would notice, wow, that tournament was actually really disorganized. What are some more tools that we can use to organize that? And then I started helping with bracketing tools, started thinking about icebreaker events. So that was really what I did. Was I knew I was not an expert, and then I just went in and did everything. I was people sometimes talk down on being a jack of all trades, but when it comes to getting into club leadership, that is oftentimes a good starting point. And then you can hone in on what you really resonate with, what you like to do, or where your talents are. So that's what I did. I just, kind of honed in on that, eventually got used to leading meetings, leading projects, and kind of got used to doing events. And that's really I think the most challenging part sometimes of running a club is kind of people management and then also event management. So those are the things that I really honed in on to make sure that I would be a good leader for the future people at UCI that wanted to do this.
Well, thank you for a perfect transition into our next question about tournament and event organization. Flagship events and larger scale events are kind of becoming integral to any club's, I guess, status and recognition to sponsors, other organizations, and it's all gamers around the world, I guess. Talk a bit about your experience hosting your I don't know, your first couple Scarlet Classics or other large events.
Oh God, the first Scarlet Classic, Jesus. So not a lot of people know this story, but basically during the first Scarlet Classic, this happened in spring of 2015. We were all super ready. No, we weren't. We didn't really know how to play on land, but that's kind of what happens when you're super new. But this was during in the midst of a massive Rutgers DDoS attack. So you could imagine we're all here getting ready to do this event, and suddenly online play is completely not doable, right? So and it wasn't just us, right? The internet for the entire school was down. So that definitely made our event not as good. But those are kind of those things, especially when it comes to event planning, that you really can't plan for, especially at the collegiate level. How are we supposed to know we're supposed to protect against a DDoS attack on a college esport budget, right? I think it definitely taught us that. But at the same time, too, it taught us the strength of LAN, but also the fighting game community, especially Smash Melee, that kind of saved our event. And they really pulled through. Got a lot of people, so that was really, really important for us. And I think that one of the most important things as well, when it comes to those things, after, like, once you do that, kind of what Kathy said, you have to kind of learn from your mistakes. It's okay to fail, especially in collegiate. And that's what really helped us make Scarlet Classic 2, which was definitely not a great event because we decided we would start planning it a month before it happens, but we still made it happen. And we also somehow blew out an entire circuit on a wall. But you learn all these lessons, and then that's what made Scarlet Classic 3 really, really special. I'm sure Scott and Chad could talk more about that, but we were really lucky, and I think that's where we kind of culminated everyone's kind of knowledge together, kind of just all fused together, and we were really, really proud of that event. It's still something I'm very, very proud of, one of the highlights of my life, honestly.
Awesome. So I guess one of the things leaders tend to fail with most is kind of resolving with conflicts, right? As Kathy said earlier, like people management. And so, Kathy, is there any instance in your club which you've dealt with a really like toxic situation between your members or your e-board, or even like at one of your events, and then like how you dealt with that situation?
Yeah, I can think of a couple anecdotes. I'm obviously gonna spend more time on one of them, but I do want to say like these are situations that are gonna come up, and most students don't get conflict management training. Like this isn't something that you just naturally know how to do. So I do think this is something we can improve it as a whole collective community. Like if we start normalizing things like training yourself how to resolve conflict, how to approach people, how to be confrontational if you have to. These are things that I feel like was the most stressful part of my presidency because no one talked about it, and then things would happen. Things just would happen and you'd have to know how to deal with it. So I'm going to speak about like this event. It wasn't purely a UCI event. It wasn't a club event necessarily, but there are a lot of clubs working on it. There are a couple SoCal, other orgs working on it. But this is something that stands out a lot to me, is that there was a semi-professional player that attended our event, a woman who had a very jarring experience from the moment she walked into the door of our event to competing, to sitting in the audience, to practicing, to playing, and then to leaving the event. There were always little small incidents that would happen, or big incidents. Like there were just constant like situations in which they were either sexist or racist or toxic, because our community, we still have so far to go. And this was also back in, I think, 2015. And we've gotten a little better, but there's still so much we can do. And like, I was a director of that event. I was kind of aware of what was going on because I would hear like some people might be talking about it, like, wait, what's happening over there? And it wasn't until really late at night in which someone told me the whole story about what was happening literally the whole day. There was an announcer that was making sexist comments, basically implying that women who were there to compete were eye candy to be looked at. Not to compete, not to be, part of the event, and to enjoy it and just be able to be a part of this event that was for everyone. And then there were also volunteers that were saying things that were inappropriate, like implying that women were only there with a boyfriend or only there to be a spectator and not to compete. And these things, the moment I heard about it, like my heart just sunk in my chest, because I personally obviously have experienced some of this as well. And I was just like, wow, I call myself a director of this event and I was oblivious. No one told me until hours after the fact. And now like there's multiple people out there that have had a terrible experience. And what am I going to do? And I'm a student and I'm like, I don't know what to do. So what we did was we did call a meeting with all the staff and volunteers. We explained what happened. We were like, this is not okay. This is what's going to change, because it was also a 2-day event. So we were like, okay, day 1, it's over. I wish I knew earlier, but now this is how we can improve on day 2. And then we reached out to the people that were complaining. We gave them like a person, like face-to-face talk to explain what happened and like to apologize for it. We fired the announcer that was being sexist. There were just all these things that we did, but it was not fast enough. And I think that was a wake-up call for me, was like, there can be so many things happening in your event that you might not be aware of. But as you host more events, as you open yourself up to feedback, like send out feedback forms. Like you're gonna get feedback that your event was bad in certain ways, but that's okay. Like that's how you improve. That's how you make this space better and safer for everyone. And those are painful lessons, but they are so, so important.
So my story is definitely not going to be as serious as that, but I think it kind of shows the spectrum of kind of conflicts that you deal with in collegiate esports. So once upon a time, we were at Costco and we were getting snacks for our winter event called the Fireside Open. And we got a whole bunch of snacks. It was really cool. And then we took a picture and sent it to the Rutgers Esports Officer group chat. And once we were done paying, I went off and did the whole president thing and looked at the receipt and tried to make sure that we got everything that we needed. I wanted to make sure that I knew how much money that we were going to be spending and everything like that, considering the budget for the event was actually really ballooning. So while I'm doing that, I come back and everyone's talking about this thing that happened. And I was not looking at the chat because I was looking at the receipt. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that someone had already left the chat and people were just like, I can't believe this person left the chat and blah, 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 blah. Long story short, it's going to sound crazy, but this person left the chat because they could not believe that we had bought Fiber One bars that was on the cart. And the Fiber One bars actually weren't even for the event. It was for an officer that wanted to get them for personally, and they were going to pay for it themselves. But I guess the Fiber One's bars were such an insult to their taste in snacks. I don't really know, but they left the chat basically, especially once they made that comment, because everyone kind of jumped on them, unfortunately, and started to make fun of them and tease them. And I didn't realize how serious it was. I was just like, okay, well, they left the chat. I'm sure that they'll come back, blah, 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 blah. And I didn't really realize it was that big of an issue until another officer DM'd me and was like, Adam, you need to deal with this. Like, it's a very, very large problem. And candidly, at the time, I had never dealt with something like that before. So it was very, very hard for me. I actually, like, as dramatic as it sounds, I contemplated stepping down because I felt so embarrassed about how I handled the situation. But long story short, I talked to the officer one-on-one, just wanted to get his take about what happens and to figure out what we could do so we could get them back on board, especially considering there was big events kind of happening. And they were really nice and candid about it. Honestly, they just said that I wanted to make sure that if I'm a part of this group, that I'm recognized and that my voice is heard, which is totally fair. And I think it goes back to the whole idea. If you're going to be having this collective of people who are all trying to accomplish things, you have to make sure that everyone feels like they have a voice, that they feel recognized, that they don't feel like they're marginalized. So it was really, really important. I still can't believe it was over Fiber One bars, but it did teach me a very, very important lesson. And it's definitely one that you can never, ever forget. And I already see Scott talking about it all in the chat. So
maybe I should get some Fiber One bars. Might teach me some life lessons.
Yeah, go for it.
One of the thing that kind of always takes the back burner for a lot of college clubs is transitioning. And so both of you guys are obviously very inspirational leaders. You guys learned a lot throughout your process. But the hard part is kind of passing that knowledge down. How do you give it to the next person and make sure they're prepared to take the reins and, fill in some really, really big shoes? But it's not just them, right? You have to make sure all your other officers are helping their counterparts also transition into that position. So could you guys both talk about what you guys did to help ease the transition process and what you did to make sure that your club would succeed even after you left?
Yeah, I'll start. I will admit I was not that prepared and that great at this.
It's okay, same, don't worry.
Been the co-founder, I was basically on the front line of trying to figure out how to manage the transition, when I realized that I was going to graduate soon. So the strategies that we used, one was to create an internship program. So we had people that would apply to be interns before they became officers, and we basically had a shadowing program for them. So we would assign a graphic design intern to the graphic designer. Clearly, I'm partial to graphic design, sorry. And basically, they would follow them through, this is what it's like to be a graphic designer. This is my process. These are people I report to. And it was really just a hands-on learning experience. Ideally, we would have had a lot more documentation for things. So that's what I always tell people now is document everything, share your Google Drives, archive that stuff, archive your feedback forms. So then people can just look back and just grab stuff and reuse it instead of having to reinvent the wheel every single time. That's something I failed at. And then another thing that was kind of the shadowing opportunity, but a little further, is that I essentially, my last year of college, kind of took a step back. I was like, yes, I'm still the president. I want to be here for you as an advisor or a president or whatever leader that you need. But because I know I'm leaving so soon, I'm going to stop leading everything. I stopped being the leader of meetings. I stopped writing minutes. I stopped doing a lot of the big picture stuff I used to do. And instead I was like, you need help with anything, you ask me. Our VP at the time, I was like, you need anything, just ask me. I will still step up. I will still help out, but I'm going to pretend like I'm gone already. And I basically gave them at least half a year of experiencing that. So by the time I left, even though I admit I could have documented more, I could have done more training, but because of that literal kind of dump them in the water and just to handle it. That was actually really good hands-on experience for them. So that's how we handled it. I'm sure things have changed since I left that. But yeah, Adam, what have you done?
Yeah, transition was something that was very difficult for me, and I'm sure the same could be said for a lot of collegiate leaders. My strategy, at least when I was a senior, so we founded Rutgers Esports in 2014. I would say for a number of different reasons, I didn't really commit all of my attention to it until my senior year. And by that point, it was like, oh my God, I only have a year left. We have to do everything kind of thing. So my strategy at the time, which is looking back on it, definitely not the right thing to do, but it was like, okay, let me get everything started so that when I leave, they don't have to worry about getting anything started. They just have to maintain, right? So I made sure that we as a group, that we pitched to the school to get the Varsity program kind of like talks initiated. I made sure that we were already in talks with multiple different partners for events so that they didn't have to go out there and pitch them. They're already kind of like in our contact book that we could go to them for repeats. So it was a lot of different things like that, trying to make sure that whatever happened, at least they knew that they just have to keep on doing it instead of having to completely invent a new process. And it was good in a way, but at the same time, I think there was a lot of problems and challenges that come with that, right? If we're the ones who are doing all the work, you don't give the opportunity for them to experience it themselves and learn the ins and outs of it. I think that was definitely something that I could have done better. I definitely also tried to basically make insane amount of guides by the end of my senior year and even in my summer, and certainly could have been a little bit better. I think we did try though. And I did make sure to make myself available to any of the officers who needed help. I still do that even to this day, though I'm certainly not as hands-on anymore. And all of that, I think, did help. But ultimately, what I think I failed in is that I should have been there more to like just coach them through things and to make sure that they actually did it themselves, that they would feel confident instead of just me doing it. Just like, all right, here are all the steps. You just have to read the steps and you'll be fine. We all know that sometimes reading an instruction manual isn't the same thing, and you can't do it the same proficiency as if you've done it before. And I wish that I did that better. And I actually did an entire presentation about this when I was at TESPA, but ultimately, what matters is that you have to make sure that you invest into recruitment and training and onboarding extremely heavily, right? The worst thing that you can do is that you do so much for your club, and then within the 2 years after you graduate, it dies, right? You want your club to last for generations. And the only way that you can do that is by having a strong system like that. And it's hard, right? Like, what kind of company can you think of that changes their CEO almost every single year? It doesn't really happen. So it is almost an impossible standard to have, but you do have to keep it. Otherwise, your club won't be the way that you want it to be, or the way it continues on, kind of thing. So it's difficult, but I would say it's probably one of the most, I usually say top 3 most important things for you to do as a leader, as a club, so that you continue to flourish for generations.
I got it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The final question before we head into Q&A is that both of you guys have continued your careers in esports. Both of you have continuously developed your skills, and I'm sure failed and grown as people over and over again. Do you guys have any final thoughts about what skills you wish you knew you had, that you've learned now, or just things you just would have told yourself, your younger self? Kathy, if you want to start.
Yeah, I would say that I actually feel like a lot of the skills that I use today, so kind of the opposite of your question, but a lot of the skills in my professional life were developed through failing and trying and learning as a collegiate organization leader. And I think I mentioned it before, but don't be afraid to use this as a time to learn and make mistakes and get better. If anything, I would just tell myself back then to try to be more confident. I was constantly knowing that I was testing the waters. So therefore I was like, oh, people are going to notice I'm an imposter, I'm just doing whatever. But honestly, if you own it and you just try your best and your intention is there, I think that that's the best way to grow and the best way to have a good result as being a leader in your org. And I think Adam was kind of hinting at this, but also I had a lot of trouble, and I know a lot of collegiate leaders have trouble letting go of their baby. So the fact that I was one of the founders and I was there for a really long time, I was in the habit of doing everything sometimes. I would be doing tickets, I would be doing marketing, social media posts, whatever for a certain event. And I'm like, wait, I'm not training our sponsorship intern or our social media intern to do those posts and to do these outreach efforts because I'm like, oh, I got to do it perfect and we need to do it now and it has to be done. And to kind of let go, to let people learn in that and make mistakes, you're going to have a lower quality product sometimes, but then ultimately when you leave, it's going to be better. So I think that's something that's been very difficult. I've seen a lot of my friends as well. They're just they've graduated and they still keep going back to their flagship event, for example, and saying hey, did you do your sponsor shout outs yet? And little things like that. So I think that's something I would tell myself too, is don't be afraid to delegate better And yeah, that's pretty much mostly it. And then I also do want to point out that I do say that gaming, not just being a club leader, but gaming has helped me a lot. So like leading a guild, leading a raid group, putting together virtual social events, that has prepared me so well for COVID actually, because I'm so used to doing things in a virtual environment from that. And so I'm just like, take all your experiences and don't think of anything as worthless, because it'll help you eventually in your career.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, myself included, have a lot of trouble not being the helicopter parent once you, kind of grow out of it. So that was definitely me. For me, I have to really echo what Kathy said. Everything that kind of happened in Collegiate is what prepared me for who I am today. And I certainly wouldn't take back those experiences because they really taught me a lot about myself. But I will say that a part of me wishes that I went all in into esports. Like for the longest time, I love this thing so much and that, I really want to do it. But I was always like, I'm going to be the good Asian boy. I'm going to get a physical therapy degree and I'm going to, just go and be a PT because that's what I'm supposed to do. Right. And I never did my due diligence in trying to figure out what actually I could do in esports and actually make it a career. Like I didn't even know that you could be an intern at Riot or Blizzard until my senior year. And by then it was too late. Right. So I think it's just really important to make sure that, you do your best, you actually go all in. And I didn't go all in until my senior year, like I said before, for a number of different reasons. It was definitely spending way too much time trying to chase a girl, but that's a different story for another time. My point is that you should go all in. Like I think that people would be shocked at how much you can get done when you actually push yourself, especially with a team, right? So many of us think we have these ideas about this is how much I can go before I break. Especially at our age, in my experience, most of the time you break those barriers and then you're kind of shocked at how much you can actually get done. So I'd really recommend that. And I think the other thing is something that both Kathy and I have kind of touched on before is that you really need to delegate. It's so easy, especially if you're a co-founder, to like carry your baby wherever you go and don't let anyone ever touch it and stuff like that. But you have to make sure that you delegate. You have to make sure that not only you're teaching people, but you're also just not putting it all on yourself. It's super easy to be able to just like, well, I'm going to do sponsorships and event planning and the stream, and I'm going to cast at the same time. Like it's so easy to really, really get trapped in that. And you really shouldn't. You need to be able to delegate. You need to be able to find people who can do all of those things, because at the end of the day, that's what makes a more effective team, right? If one person is doing everything, ultimately the entire community suffers in that regard.
Cool. Thanks both of you for sharing all of your experiences, all your knowledge. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people who are watching this right now. So we're going to start on Q&A. The first question is, how can a gaming organization create a space of gender inclusivity as well as awareness in the face of sexism, racism, and toxicity within a collegiate gaming community, whether it pertains to either the esports or the general community? I know who wants to start.
Yeah, I touched on this a tiny bit with the event anecdote, but that was really contained within that event, environment. So I think from a gaming organization standpoint, there's a couple things you can do. One is know your resources on campus. It's really important to know what services are actually available to students, including officers and members, if something were to happen. How do you report things? Who on campus can help you with free counseling or advice or anything like that? Are there forms that you should make readily available to your club to report things anonymously? Basically just thinking about how can you find out about these things before they happen or right after they happen? And then also planning for prevention. So on that side of things, I would say the event example touched on a little bit, in which we brought everyone back together, talked to our staff, made sure people knew what was not okay. So that aspect of it still holds. So training your staff well before an event or before anything, having officer meetings, actually talking about this, building this into your charter, all these things that are really important for preventing things to happen instead of just always being reactive. And I would say that to provide a more solid example, one would be to actively think about your elevation rules, I guess. How do you elevate situations, whether that's to a professional or whether that's to faculty or staff or your advisor or something like that. And then also, how do you handle things retroactively? So for us, we had a 3-strike system for just basic things. So if someone made one kind of weird joke, but it wasn't hurtful and it wasn't directly harassing, they get a warning. If someone was directly sexist and caused someone to have a terrible experience, they no longer want to be a member of the club, whatever, that was more significant than just being 1 out of 3 strikes. And then we also came up with an idea to, this is controversial, but banning people, right? There's only so much you can do, especially we are a public institution. We can't really kick people out permanently, but there's a way for us to like intentionally as officers and sharing with our members too, like we don't engage with these people. We're not comfortable having them near people they may have abused in the past or people that don't feel comfortable around them. And having those rules be very, very clear across your entire board is super helpful, because you can say there was one person that was banned from events because they were consistently just like pushing boundaries all the time. And what would happen is the front desk staff of that flagship event knew who they were, had a picture of them. The moment they kept trying to sneak into the staff room, they were like, oh, I was an ex-officer, I just want to say hi. They were like, no, actually, you're not allowed back there. And it got to some point in which I had to step in, and I met them outside. I explained everything. I'm like, you're on our blacklist and you know why, and we're not going to let you in. And just being comfortable and prepared to do things like that was very helpful for us.
Yeah, I would say that you definitely just have to draw the line somewhere when it comes to, you know, unfortunate circumstances like that. And I think Kathy hit the head, you know, hit the point on the head when it comes to, you have to have a system in place, right? You can't be like, oh, like something happened, what do we do, right? You know, you need to plan for these things and make sure that not only to internally know what to do, but also externally, right? Everyone knows the consequences of the actions that they might perform, kind of thing. You know, I think that there was a lot of things at Rutgers that we tried to do, and that some that were successful. I think one of those things is that we try to do key collaborations on campus, especially if we like there are some areas where you're simply just not as knowledgeable, and we tried to make sure that we knew, like, hey, like honestly, like we're not quite sure how to make sure that, you know, we're creating the most you know, diverse and kind of fostering environment, kind of thing, welcoming environment. So we talked to different people on campus, whether it be actually at the school level or even other clubs, right, like Women in Coding or even other minority groups, just to make sure that we understood, like, hey, like, you know, we're just coming here from a place of learning. We know that we're not the best thing right now. We want to be better. I think that was really, really critical. I think the other thing is too is just like some basic stuff about like if your club is full of only guys or whatever it is, like it's probably not going to feel as welcoming to people who are not part of insert group here, kind of thing. So it's important to make sure that you're being welcoming of those other groups, and also that you have officers that make up of that group as well. You know, it's easy to kind of think to yourself that like, oh, well, like we only have the officers that are available, but there are so many people who are truly capable of being an officer and in fact excel at being an officer, but they don't apply for one reason or another. And it's your job to make sure that you get rid of every single one of those barriers so that anyone in your community, whoever they be, can apply to be an officer and succeed at doing so without fear of insert thing here, things like that.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. So what are some things student esports leaders can use to have the tough conversations with their administration when they transition from a club to varsity program? How can students keep their esports organizational authenticity intact when more administrators step in to take control over aspects of what might have been a student role? And in turn, can students ask for recognition for what they have built?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. So I obviously lived through that transition period from a club to a varsity program, administrating, taking over certain things. I would say that the advice that I give students, so that's the first half of the question, is document what you've accomplished. Again, I think Adam touched on this a little bit about like knowing the statistics about your events, kind of knowing what you've accomplished and what you can be proud of, presenting that to administrators and saying, look, this is all we've done with zero support from you. Imagine what we can do together with your support. So one of the key tactics for UCI to become a varsity program was to bring all of the, you know, the tournaments we've won, the events we've hosted, how much we were able to like balance our budgets and all that stuff, and just like kind of prove that we were being seen as a leader in the collegiate space, even without them getting involved. And so that's a recruitment tool, right? That's a sense of pride for them. That's, you know, bringing in a whole different audience to the school. It's a sense of pride. So there's a lot of things that you can play on just based on what you think your school cares most about. We also worked really hard to talk to faculty and how we can further like research with them. And that's a big priority at UCI. So just try to understand your school, try to talk to someone that's already an administrator about what stuff they would want for them to want to support you at that varsity level. The second half is how to balance the role of clubs and administration once a varsity program does come in. There's obviously a lot of people looking at starting esports programs at their school while they are already staff. And sometimes these people don't know anything about esports. They just know that they're going to be left behind if they don't create a program. So for those, it really is proving the value that I mentioned before, but also being very clear before they even start the varsity program. Like, hey, this is the niche we really want to fill. This is the niche that it makes sense for you to fill as an official entity at the university. So for us, for example, UCI Esports handles League of Legends, Overwatch, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the teams. So we can't have like a club League of Legends team joining college League of Legends with us because that just doesn't make sense. We're using our logos, we're using our brand, and we hire coaches to manage all of that. But our clubs have always been really good about the social aspect. So being clear from the get-go and saying like, hey, can you not maybe not do tournaments or maybe not do like the club social events and fun stuff for your students, because we have a club for that and we're really good at it and we want to keep that community and own it and obviously have those opportunities to build careers by, as we mentioned, all these skills come in handy. So having those conversations as early as possible and also not being confrontational about it, because it hurts to have some of the stuff be credited to the university when you've built it up for so long. But there's got to be some compromise. You're not going to be able to convince the university that they can't own esports at all because you've been there for so long, but finding a way to be collaborative, to be open to ideas, and still stand strong in the things that you care about most.
Yeah, I think Kathy clearly has more experience in this, considering Rutgers hasn't had a varsity program. We're in the works. We're trying, but I really want to echo something that Kathy said about not being confrontational and making sure that you're really communicating with the administration. At the end of the day, so much of this is about education and being transparent, right? Like they're probably coming from a place where they have no idea even what video games are or how important video games are. And you really have to explain to them, like really go from the beginning. Like what I remember when I did my pitch to Rutgers Esports with some of the other officers, we didn't even start with our club. It went like video games, then it went to esports, then it went to collegiate esports, and then we talked about our club. You have to like do the funnel, right? So it's really, really important to make sure that you set the stage correctly and make sure that they understand all the little intricacies, right? And again, that goes back to education. Like it's not their fault that they don't know. Like you don't need to be mean to them about it. You just have to tell them like, look, this is how it is. This is who we are. This is what we want to do. We want to do it because of X, Y, and Z reason, and we know that this works because of this, and we think that it'll positively impact the school in this way. Most of the time when you break things down to people and you present the evidence correctly, they're going to be fine. Like if you told an administrator like, hey, we're going to increase enrollment, not saying that you should do that, but let's just say use that as an example. They're not going to be like, how dare you increase enrollment? What's wrong with you? Like that's not really how it works, right? So you have to make sure that you present things correctly, have constant communication. One thing that I really did to try and make sure I built that relationship, again, something that Kathy did, was I always talked to different professors if I didn't know something. Like I remember I spoke to a professor in sport marketing just to get his advice on how I could grow the club, and I built that relationship. And there was another professor that did sports history kind of thing, and I wanted to learn from him about some lessons that we could learn maybe from traditional sports that we could apply to esports. And then I remember at one point, every single Friday, I'd go to the open office hours of one of the, I think it was like the head of student affairs. I forget what her official job title was, but regardless, I go to her office hours every single Friday and just try and have a conversation with her and give her an update about who we are, what are we doing. Hey, like, look, like we really want to work with you. This is what we've done in the past week, things like that. So it was really, really important for us. And I think that would really, really help out, is if you come from a place of education and being transparent, excuse me.
Well, perfect way to end. You guys are educating the next generation of leaders, just like you educated you guys yourselves, I guess, during your time as a college leader. I think that's all the time we have for this panel. So thank you, Adam. Thank you, Kathy, for joining me and kind of talking about what your guys' experience was when you were club leaders. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks to UConnect for having us.